All right. So I've modeled for this presentation this very simple, very uncomfortable sculpture that some of us know, unfortunately.
Don't sell yourself short, Gracjan.
So basically, I've made the low poly, high poly. I've exported both. And now let's import it to Substance Painter. So there are a few presets for like general PBR workflow, for specular and metallic roughness, and for different engines, even for Roblox apparently. But let's stick with Unreal Engine. So importing the low poly. I don't have any outside bake maps. I often use Marmoset Toolbar to make normal maps and ambient occlusion because it's interactive and real time. But for this, Substance Painter will be good enough. So now I need to, once I have the mesh imported, as you can see, 3D view and 2D view, I need to bake mesh maps so that the program can basically analyze the model. And I can import, I can bake the low poly here by itself, or I can import the high poly mesh. So here, let's stick to default settings except for this. This is ID map. I'll show you in a moment. Helps with masking things. So now it's baking all the maps like normal, mid occlusion, thickness, and curvature. It helps to use different generators. So now we can see we have already applied and baked normal map. Includes some details from high poly mesh. And ID map is useful with complex meshes for differentiating what's what, because otherwise I would have to like manually mask it. And right now I can just select the color here. So let's make it a bit interactive, perhaps. What do you want the chair to be made out of?
Yeah, metal wood.
Could we do a denim back with a concrete seat?
Sure. So here are the base materials that are basically tiling textures with some different properties. I can see concrete. You have a concrete here. So I just need to slap it on mesh and it will load it in a moment. Yeah, there we go. So it basically put the texture over the whole mesh. And there are some adjustments here. Usually this is often from Substance Designer. So they are procedural. And I can change various settings. But this is one way of doing it. We can also make which is often what I do, is make fill layers and then build stack on top of it. But now let's stick with the concrete. So I want to mask the base here, right? So what I do is add black mask here, add a paint layer, and now there's two ways of going here. I can either mask it, more than two, but to the most efficient, either masking it by mesh fill, because the seat is different mesh, so I have basically selected the seat mesh to be masked, or I can select color from ID, and I can do this. So this is a very useful feature as well. And you said denim back. So these are base materials that are simple textures, and these are basically stacks of materials with different different layers that use generators that based on the textures we've baked before. So here we have fabric denim. As you can see, this is a folder with many layers here doing different things. You can still mask it out like every layer. So let's choose color selection and the back. So now you can see it's masked, and the one of the layers, I believe it's stitches, yeah, uses mask that is generator that's using UV mask to UV seams to mask out the stitching on the edges. And again, of course, everything is editable. You can change properties, change the color here. This is a material and this is mask, right? So they work a bit differently. Mask is always black and white, and this is with all the PBR properties. Right now it's color and height enabled. You can disable height and you can see it. It's flattened. Or I can disable color and you can see if the height is still here. I can add more channels here in texture set settings. These are the basic ones that we have by default, but I can add different ones depending on the shader I use here. Most common ones, or pretty much the only ones I ever use, are the basic ones here, PBR Metal Rough or PBR Metal Rough with transparency, with alpha blending. This enables me to use opacity channel, but we don't really need that right now. So let's leave it here like this. And now I want to make this piping metallic. So let's build it from the scratch. So I'll make a folder, put it on top of the stack, and let's make a fill layer called base color. So this will be my base color and base metal, perhaps, for the pipes. So let's make it 100% metallic. So you can see now it influences everything, so I need to mask it out. So mask, add paint, and mask out meshes. And now we have basic metallic pipes, but they are a bit rough. So let's use a roughness channel. By default it's 0.3, but I can change it to, let's say, more shiny. But it's very uniform. So I can add another fill layer, add the roughness, or use only roughness channel, and let's make it more rough. Name it to roughness base. Add black mask, and I'm adding fill layer again. And in the fill layer, I'm putting usually some grunge texture. There are many textures here built in, but I often also import my own textures. And this makes it it breaks uniformity, basically. Like you can see the fill layer is like put on top of the texture. I can move it around a bit, or like skeletons, everything. And as you can see, it masked out roughness channel onto the black and white texture with different values, so it's less uniform here. So we have a base metal done, and now let's make paint. Let's go to paint base, and paint is not metallic, so let's leave it on 0, and it's fairly shiny but not too much, so I think this is good. And let's, I don't know, maybe put it into blue or dark blue. And now we have a non-metallic layer on top of that, which is also a bit uniform right now. So I can also, instead of doing this like here, I can add fill layer directly into the material, and it's basically on top of the base material here. So let's use this fill layer, use only rough channel, and let's put another grunge here. And now, as you can see, it looks a bit weird because when I look only at roughness, it's roughness and everything basically except normals and base color is in black and white. So it's put the black and white grunge texture into the roughness channel, which is a bit extreme in values. So I can either decrease it here, need to change this to roughness so I can influence roughness channels, and I can tune it down, or I can change the blending mode of the layer to, let's say, overlay. And now it used overlay function to blend with the roughness that was on the base layer. And let's decrease it a little bit. And now you can see we have some detail on the roughness on the paint layer. But those chairs are usually very used and scratched. So I can add black mask to my paint layer, add the fill layer, and here I can say use generator of metal edge wear. Let's invert it. And now you can see it masked out various details on the chair, and it excluded ambient, like occluded areas, because it's generator, so it's using maps I have baked before. There's a lot of adjustments here. You can like change the wear level and wear contrast in different ways. Let's leave it like that, very used up, right? But here we can see when the meshes meet, it looks a bit, maybe not weird, but a bit basic. There's nothing going on where two pipes meet. And usually there is some kind of welding. So I could have done that on high poly. I could have sculpted that. But I can also use substance functions to simulate the detail here. So let's add a fill layer on the bottom of the stack. Let's use only height. Increase it a little bit. You can see any change because it's uniformly increasing in height, so nothing is really done here. So use black layer, fill, and use ambient occlusion. And this is generator using ambient occlusion map that we've baked before. As you can see here. So we need to invert it to use only like occluded areas. Maybe increase it a little bit here. You can see it's not really working. So maybe see how curvature mask looks. Yeah, this should work better. So instead of ambient occlusion, let's use curvature generator. And now it has masked this, but we need to invert it. There we go. So let's use a little bit of blur, contrast. And now we have a fairly nice mask in here, but it looks very uniform, right? So not like very weird because it's just black and white areas. So we need to break it up a little bit. So let's use another grunge map. And which one will look like welding? I think this one would be pretty good. So again, right now it filled it everywhere. So if I want to influence it only this area, I will use multiply. So now it's overlaying it on the mask under it. but it's a little bit too sharp here. So I can add a filter to blur it. So now we have much nicer edge here. But again, this is put in many places, and I just want it to be here. So I can add another paint layer, multiply it, and use the mesh mode, put it to black, and now everything is maxed out, and I can use paint here. Color is set to white, and now I can by hand paint where I want it to be. This is mirrored, so only one side needs to be painted. Now you can see the welding is here. Although it's a bit too strong, so maybe let's add another blur here. A bit better. The UV cut could be better here, but it's not too bad. There's some detail going on here right now, right? If I turn it down, there's nothing. And now we have some detail in here. It looks much better. So now I want, for example, the metal here, metal edge, use this data from the height layer, because it's using like curvature and all the mesh details here, but it doesn't know that I put something here. So Substance has a nice function. I can put, of course, many ways of doing it, but I do it in this way. I put it to hide. No, I disable hide. Use the hide edit filter here, and I put it this layer to pass through mode. And pass through mode basically takes all the data before it and load it into this layer. It doesn't really change anything by itself, but it's used to gather data. It's called hide data, and now I can put an anchor point here. And this is basically like a reference point for other layers. So I can take the metal edge we're generated right now, and in micro details, I can enable micro height. And in micro height, I can put the anchor point here. And reference channel will be height. And now we can see something change already. And I change it back. This generator now reads the data from height layer I've put in here. So I can change now the details on this, on those welds. We'll put it to 4K so you can see the texture better. As you can see, it's taking the welding into consideration when generating texture. You can even decrease the whole wear level and increase the micro detail intensity. As you can see, it's now taking the welds I made before and generating the texture on it. If I disable it, nothing is here. But now I've built the whole welded area. And we need, once this is done, we need metal here, so we can make another layer. But maybe let's use, I don't know, red aluminum. This is again a bit simple material, consisting only of like soft dust that for some reason isn't even visible here. But I can mask it out again and use a color selection and pick color here. Or if I wanted to paint it by hand, I can also add a paint layer in the black channel and I paint it like this. This is good for any like hand painted details. Which is also very nice for adding details by hand, because generators tend to be very like boring looking. So, and they are like generate procedurally the whole map, but there is not a lot of artistic direction there. So maybe I can add paint layer here, put it to linear dodge, because otherwise the if I paint black layer on this paint, it will like disable layer on the bottom of it. But with linear dodge or add blending mode, it's only taking into consideration white values, like anything that's not black, basically adding it on top. So you can change the brush here, and let's say dirt. Now I can paint the dirt here. Doesn't work for some reason. Because I have put it into white. So basically, black is disabled paint and white is enabled paint. So I need to invert the paint layer here, and there you go. It's working a tiny bit. So maybe use. And now why is it working? Is it not working?
Yeah, it looked like the paint flecks were being applied.
Let's put it to normal. Oh yeah, because it's only using white values. So we need to put it, let's say, for normal. So now it works. It's easy to get lost if you like do inversions and like change a lot of stuff with masks. It's easy to get lost in details. As you can see, there's a lot of it. But if I put it to normal here and just don't use wrong value, I can use dirt here, for example, and add detail by hand. Even add some scratches like this. It's a bit much. But yeah, there is a nice blend between using generators to do some stuff for me and adding details by hand. So now let's say it's done. Beautiful texture, right? Beautiful chair. Very designer. And now I want to export it to Unreal Engine. So I'm exporting texture, and now we have a lot of presets here, or output templates. I'm using usually my custom one, which I called Unreal Engine Standard, and I can change what goes where, basically. It looks a bit complex here, but in my preset, it basically takes letter T, underscore, and takes texture set name, which is this here. Right now it's default material, so let's call it chair. And here it adds underscore D for base color in RGB channels and opacity in grayscale channels, and texture set ORM into this is basically like the PBR masks. I've put AO in red channel, roughness in green channel, and metallic in blue channel. A normal map is in RGB, and emissive, if it's existing, is in RGB. So let's use this preset. Let's put it into this folder. I can change the resolution, export resolution here as well. Let's put it in 4K, and the file format as well. So it's exported. Now we have 3 exported textures. So let's go to Unreal Engine right now.
Yeah, Ricky clicked the wrong button. Yeah, he's also not in the server anymore.
By the way, did the stream pause for you several times?
That was funny.
No.
Because
Okay.
sometimes I was listening to Gracjan, but the image was on pause.
No, it was good for me.
Yeah, so when I had everything open, my GPU ran out of memory apparently, or Windows or
Okay.
whatever. So it crashed. But let's go back to it. Hope it will work this time. I guess Unreal Engine, Blender, Substance Painter, and Discord streaming is too much for 3090 Ti, apparently.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have exported textures here and my mesh here. Let's import mesh. And here I'll just combine meshes for the ease of everything. And let's import textures. So now we have our mesh and textures, right? Put mesh here on the scene. Oh, nice. All right. So there we have our chair. And we have our Substance Painter textures. Let's make a new material. This is master material. And in the most basic way, it's a texture sample. So let's use some color, or yeah, placeholder color. This is base color into RPG. Change the name. This color. Let's copy this and this will be RM texture. And it was blue in metallic, red in AO, and green in roughness. And normal map. Go and here, let's see, so normal RGB into normal map. Now we can save it and make material instance. Let's drag it onto the mesh. And now we have base color is this, normal map is this, and PBR mask is this. And there we have it, basically. Very simple setup. And we have our chair in Unreal. I can see something is not working right here. I believe we need to enable thing sRGB or disable sRGB here. Yeah, because it's using this as a mask. And there's some setup in here. Sometimes not working. Sampler type, it was near color, I believe. Anyway, there's just some tiny setup in Unreal. I don't remember which setting was it right now, but basically that's how the import into Substance Painter looks like into Unreal. So there we go. Any questions?
That was great. It's I've never used Substance Painter myself, but it's funny to see how there's sort of this consolidation of things involving layers and things involving nodes. It seems like there's a bit of a convergence there. Maybe they've all sort of been following that pattern for some time now, but that was nice to see. My question is on the Unreal import. So in Substance Painter, of course, you had this nice workflow between doing things generatively and then doing things by hand. When you're importing these materials into Unreal, what I'm curious about is, like, let's say we had some in a game we were making, we had real-time effects by the weather on, say, this chair. And so there was degradation over time when there was a certain weather event. So is there anything that comes sort of exposed out of the box, or does that require a bit of setup in Unreal itself that you would just have to do in the material graph?
A bit of both. So let's say I want to make a rust mask on this chair, right? That would get increased when it's raining.
That's a good example.
So I hope it would crash this time. Let's maybe put this out. Fake load. That's awesome. Okay, let's load it again. Maybe cover. No, never mind. So quick load. Let's bake it. Right. So I want to make a custom channel here, right? To put some material just to have something. I don't know, bone. Yes. And I want to have rust. So I can add a user channel. It's a user 0. And I can make a fill layer or whatever that's influencing user channel, say on white. And maybe just to make sure it's correct layer with completely black on the bottom. So I can now see user here. So it's black here, fill, and here's the folder with like generators and masks. Let's say surface rust. That's like the stack of layers. And inverted. So this is basically, this is it. This is like the rust mask for Unreal, right? Black and white. And all I need to do is add onto my output template another like texture. Let's copy this. So I'm adding this, and I believe here, yeah, I have user 0 here on gray channel. And right now, when I export it with my channel here, here, so folder, and I can even select which ones get exported. So I have a mask here, exported, and here we have Rust mask that can be added to Unreal Material. So now I basically imported into here. Let's say let's make a super quick material, another texture here. Just and whatever multiply. I'm not sure which blending mode to use, but let's just use multiply. And now I believe it's the color here, and put it in base color. Why is it throwing error? Oh, float 3. So float 3 here. Yeah, it's, I don't know, it's pink. save it. And now in here, I'm putting this. And now we have like rust layer. Of course, to make it like look good, I need to use probably different blending than multiply. I don't know, maybe add or whatever. But it's just a matter of few nodes.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, just thinking out loud here. Then is if, say, for example, it seems there's maybe two ways you could go about this. Is do you have a tendency? If you have an idea of things like this, will you sometimes stub it out in Substance and then pull it in? And then the inverse of that is if we're doing something in Unreal Engine and you identify that something like that needs to be added, do you naturally, is there anything that you would sort of natively do in Unreal for that, or this is the workflow that you would follow where you would go back into Substance, create this user channel, and then bring it back in?
It depends what needs to be done, but like here, like you said, the weather effect on like progressing rust on the object, then probably the best way is to go to Substance Painter. Although there are different methods as well. Like it depends on what we need, right? I could, instead of this, use probably like a triplanar mask that would just be uniform, fairly uniform and cheaper, that we could put on many meshes, because this is like basically a texture per object if we want it to look like unique. Could also put
that was going to be my next
on,
question. Is let's say we decided we had like an abandoned area outside and it had a chair, a barrel, and like 10 other meshes. Would you still do the process that you just showed for that, or is there a different way you would approach it, knowing that you would have to sort of batch apply the rust?
I would probably test how it looks. Here I put some default texture, and you can see in this case it looks quite decent actually. Now there will be problem with tiling and seams, but in here it looks decent, so not a problem. And if it looks good, then we can go with like simpler method. But let's say for hero asset, for something like changing or moving, this is probably like the best idea. And I can even add like a multiply here to like make texture like stronger or weaker, because this is not like entirely black and white. It's there's different values, right? So multiply will affect them basically. So it depends on what we need on the asset and like how it needs to work. It's hard to give a definite answer for this.
Okay, great. And is there any relationship between material layers in Unreal Engine and Substance Painter? Any workflow there, or is that largely a Unreal specific thing?
No, as far as I know, there is none. Layers in Substance Painter are basically like layers in Substance Painter and textures in Unreal are like working in Photoshop on a image and exporting PNG.
Yep. So they're they're encapsulated in sort of the single thing. Okay.
If you export material from Unreal Designer into Unreal Engine with Substance plugin, then you can change parameters and regenerate textures. But that goes through Substance plugin.
Yep. Okay. That's it for me. Anyone else?
Yeah, let's say, for example, a client wants you to put their logo on the denim.
Okay.
Do you need to go to Substance Painter to add the logo, or can you just grab the denim texture and paste the logo in Photoshop and update the folder?
Yeah, I can. I can basically like open this texture in Photoshop, put the logo in here, and if it looks good, then that's probably simpler. But I can also go back to Substance Painter and put logo in there and put it on texture as well, which
Cool,
is very simple to do.
If the logo, for example, is in a place that is not affected heavily by the rust or by the special effects on that layer, I suppose it depends on if the logo, for example, it's near the welding zone.
Oh yeah, if it's on the edge of UV, then I would totally go back to Substance Painter, because there you can stamp image on 3D view and it automatically puts it into UVs.
And if you, for example, you will work on an unlit game and need to add some shadows by hand, for example, in the lower part of the chair, just, for example, make the chair darker in the bottom. Will you do another layer, or is something that goes in the diffuse?
Example of, I don't know, crystal. So here I'm using a base color view. This is how it looks like in full PBR view, but we don't use shadows, so I'm using base color only, basically unlit mode. And if I want to add the shadow by hand, I usually go with fill layer, put it the color I want, use a black mask, and I can paint by hand or use generator or whatever, and then I can change the mask opacity or something. I can also use just straight up paint layer and paint whatever I want here, change colors and stuff. So you can paint it, but this is very destructive workflow, let's say, because if later I want to go back and change it and, for example, separate those two colors, I can't, because it's paint layer. But if I do it on masks, I can duplicate this mask, for example, and paint something different here with different color. Then I can enable or disable it, or change the flow. So there's different methods, but paint layers on colors, or I can even technically put a material here and paint the whole paint straight up material on this. But it's very destructive, right? So I'm usually working on, as you can see, it's not tiling, it's putting the image in.
Otherwise, you do it directly on the 2D textures. You need to keep also PSDs for all the layers, right?
Do I need to what?
For example, if you paint the shadows directly in Photoshop instead of going to Substance Painter, you have the layers, but it's also you'll still have to do a normal PNG for Unreal, right?
If it influences the normal, then yeah. But painting shadows or AO usually doesn't include normal map. So normal map is basically detail that isn't there, that reacts to light. So you can, for example, go to Photoshop and paint a bit of ambient occlusion texture, which it will be a bit harder on exported textures, because you are working with colorful masks. Basically, this texture will be on red channel, which is a bit tedious to work in Photoshop, in my experience. But often it's good to go back to Substance Painter, unless this is something very quick and simple.
Cool.
All right. Thank you, brother. That was great.
Right. Glad you liked it. So that's
High
it, folks.
5. All right. Thank you.